Welcome to Mr. R's art class. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thumbs, subs, and ring that bell. So for this video, we're going to go ahead and make a line poster. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make 20 different line samples. Then we're going to make a rough draft, and then finally a final draft. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to draw about 20 different types of lines. We're going to draw about 20 different types of lines. You could spread them out. You just kind of come up with a rough draft of what 20 different types of lines look like. So you could draw a circle, and you could repeat that circle and vary maybe the size of it. You could also make some a little bit bigger, move them around, and you could even draw some circles inside of the other circles if you'd like. So that's a circle, and you could vary the different size. It could be the same shape, but maybe vary the size around that type of line. You could also use a triangle, and you could also rotate some of these shapes here. So you could have a right side triangle or an upside down triangle together. So that could be a type of line. So maybe start with some basic shapes, some shapes that you might be used to. You could also have some squares here. And you could have some of these squares maybe overlapping. So you could have a square there in the front and a different square behind it. You could also put squares inside of each other. So not only are they overlapping, but now you have squares that are inside of each other. You could have some more abstract shapes, so maybe like a star here. All right, and then you could even have some smaller stars next to it. You could also use some wavy lines. That could be a type of line. Have a thinner line next to it. You could also use that same line and maybe put some smaller waves inside of it too. So you could turn some pretty basic lines into some more complex lines as well. You can have that same shape next to each other using the same technique. You could also start with a regular line that goes straight up and down. You could change the width of the line, so you could have a thinner line, a wider line, and create a pattern. You could also change the direction of that line. Right, so we talked about rotating a type of line. You could even change the angle of that line. So we have some lines here that go vertical, so these lines that go straight up and down, or these lines that go from left to right. But you could also change the angle here, so we could have a diagonal line. You could have a diagonal line that's a little bit wider. And then you could also create a pattern by adding a thinner line back to that. You could have some maybe organic shapes, so maybe a water drop, maybe an upside down water drop, and then a right side water drop. You could maybe have some wavy lines here. That could be a different type of line that you use. And you can have maybe a smaller wave inside of that, or in front of that. You could probably flip your paper and put a wave upside down. And see what that turns into. And a lot of these aren't filled in yet, so you could have some of these shapes, and you could have this shape not filled in. You could probably fill this shape in, have that shape not filled in. The next shape would be filled in. Right, so think about how you could start with some really basic lines, then think about how some of those lines could turn into geometric shapes, some abstract shapes here like these stars here, some organic shapes like these water drops. So the next thing that you're going to do is we're going to create a rough draft for our line poster. So you're going to grab a regular sheet of paper, and we're going to draw some lines on this regular sheet of paper. This is going to help us get used to using a ruler as well. So you're going to grab your regular sheet of paper, and you should have it sitting in front of you horizontally. That means longest from left to right, or longest from right to left. And you're going to grab a ruler, and we're going to put that ruler at the bottom of that piece of paper here, and we're going to make a row for every type of line that we're going to have for our line poster. So every single row that we're going to have is going to be a different type of line. So we're going to line up our ruler at the bottom of our piece of paper. Make sure that your zeros lined up with the left side of your piece of paper. Zero's that first black line, and we're going to make a mark at every single inch. So every single inch. Those big marks next to each numbers are the inch marks. So the big lines next to each numbers are going to be the inch marks. And by the time you get to 11, you should be lined up with the right side of your piece of paper. Now what we're going to do is we're going to slide our ruler to the top. We're not going to rotate our paper. We're not going to rotate our ruler. You're just going to slide your ruler to the top here. And your zero should be still lined up with the left-hand side. So that first black line on your ruler should be lined up with the left-hand side. And we're going to do the same thing up here. Make a mark at every single inch. Make a mark at every single inch. Make a mark at every single inch. And by the time you get to 11, you should be lined up with the right-hand side of your piece of paper. And we're going to go ahead and connect those marks. Go ahead and connect those marks. Line those marks up first, and then connect them. You could just start drawing your lines lightly if you'd like, in case you make a mistake. So line up the marks, then connect. 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 And so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines here on the front. And you could do the same thing to the back. You would do the same thing on the back. So you would have 11 lines on the front and 11 lines on the back. So in every single row that we created, we're going to go ahead and put a line design in every single row. So this top row up here, you could go ahead and put one of the types of lines that you came up with and fill in this whole row here. So this whole row is going to be different types of circles that it came up with. And again, you could vary the size. You don't have to follow a certain pattern, but this whole row here should be different types of circles or different types of lines that you came up with. So this line design should take up this whole row here. And then on this next row could be a different type of line. So this is going to be, again, your rough draft for your line poster. You could think about which order that these lines are going to go in. And for your final poster, they don't have to go in the same order. This is why this is a rough draft. And some of these lines that go and start on your rough draft don't even have to make it to your final draft. This is just kind of giving you a rough idea of what's going to go on your final draft. Okay? So again, you could rearrange the order from your rough draft, which this is, to your final draft. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make a line poster. The first step that we need to do is we need to make a 1/2 inch frame around the edge of this larger piece of paper. Okay, so what we're working on is a 12 by 18 piece of paper, and we're going to put a 1/2 inch frame around the edge of this piece of paper. Okay, so make sure at this point that your paper is sitting in front of you vertically, and that means that your paper is longest from top to bottom or from bottom to top, and that your paper is not sitting in front of you horizontally, that your paper is not sitting in front of you longest from left to right or right to left. So we're going to move our paper, have our paper sitting in front of us vertically. You're going to line up your 0, that first black mark on your ruler with the left side of your paper. That first black mark needs to be lined up with the left side of your paper, not the edge of your ruler, that first black mark. And you're going to make a mark at a 1/2 inch and at 11.5. Then you're going to slide your ruler to the top. You're not going to rotate your ruler, you're not going to rotate your paper, you're just going to slide your ruler to the top. You can make the same measurements up here. Make sure that your zero is still lined up with the left side of your paper. And you're going to go ahead and connect those marks that are opposite from each other. So this mark that I have here on top is going to be connected with this mark here that I have here on the bottom. You could draw these lines lightly in case you make a mistake. And we're going to go ahead and connect these marks here on the right hand side. Okay. Now you're going to rotate your paper so that those frames that you just made on the top and bottom, so you're going to rotate your paper so your paper is sitting in front of you horizontally. Okay, so the way that your paper should look is that you have a frame on top and a frame on the bottom. Now you're going to set your ruler at the bottom of your paper, 0, that first black mark on your ruler is going to be lined up with the left side. Make a mark at 1/2 inch. Then we're going to make a mark over here at 17.5. You're going to slide your ruler to the top. Make a mark at 1/2 inch on the left hand side. And 17.5 on the right hand side. And you're going to go ahead and connect those marks that are opposite from each other on the left hand side, and those marks that are opposite from each other on the right hand side. Okay, so you can keep your paper in front of you horizontally, which what I'm going to do now is I'm going to line up my 0 on the left hand side with the frame that I have on the left hand side. So my paper is still sitting in front of me horizontally. Line my 0 up with that frame on the left hand side, and I'm going to make a mark at every single inch. Okay, so I'm starting these marks from the frame and not the edge of my paper. Okay, so your 0 is lined up with the frame, and I'm making a mark at every inch. Every inch. And the inch marks are those big lines next to each number. Make sure you're making a mark at the big line next to each number. And where it should end is at 17. Once you get to 17, you should be on the other side of the paper and not the other frame that you made on the right hand side. Now I'm going to slide your ruler to the top. Make sure that your 0, that first black line, is lined up with the frame you have on top. Make a mark at every inch. Again, the inch is the big line next to each number. And you're going to connect those marks that are opposite from each other. And at this point, there's a lot of lines here, and you could try to draw these lines as lightly as possible. Again, in case you make a mistake, you're not trying to draw too dark. So once you have the frame drawn and all the different rows drawn on your large piece of paper for your final draft, you're going to go ahead and transfer all the lines from your rough draft onto your final draft. You could still keep the 20 lines that you originally drew in case you want to add some more of those lines into your final draft. On this final draft, it only has 17 different rows here. On your rough draft, you might have had 22, and on your line samples, you might have only drawn about 20 different lines. So you don't have to have every single type of line make it onto your final draft. You could kind of pick maybe the top 17 types of lines that you like and make that onto your final draft. And again, you don't have to do the same exact thing that you did for your rough draft. For your final draft, you could rearrange some of these. So on my rough draft, I have triangles that are in the second row, and if I really want those triangles here on the top row, I could rearrange those. So this rough draft gives you a good idea, a good chance to kind of play around with different ideas that you did have. Once you have all your lines drawn on your final draft, I'm going to give you a permanent marker, and you could go around some of your designs and we could erase all these pencil marks. You could decide if you want to keep these lines here for each and every single row, or we could erase those or go over them with the marker. You could also use colored pencils if you'd like. If you have any questions about the line samples, about your rough draft or your final draft, go ahead and let me know. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And feel free to watch any of the other related videos.